Hi all, Randy Roth here. You must believe Jesus to be saved. That's the bottom line. I mean, that is it. After Jesus warns, take heed that no man deceive you in Matthew 24:4, he goes on to state that he comes after the tribulation. No scripture ever states that he comes prior to the tribulation, but man has changed it to say that he does. He created new terms like rapture and second coming to conjure up this idea that he comes before the tribulation. If you're going to teach that he comes before the tribulation, you need scripture that actually says, hey, look, this is the opposite of what Christ teaches. Otherwise, you're teaching the opposite of Christ, and therefore you are being an antichrist, opposite, contrary to Christ. That is pretty serious. That's a very serious accusation. And to say that he comes prior, well, you need something that he says. Let's look at those arguments, because every single one of those arguments that they have are built in deceit. It's their birth, totally in the concept that it's totally the contrary to what Christ says. Let's look at those. And we're told that we're told that Paul reveals this new event of a rapture found in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 51. It says, behold, I show you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. What is the mystery that Paul is revealing? He's revealing the change at the event that he calls in verse 42, the resurrection of the dead. The resurrection of the dead does not occur until the heavens are destroyed, as Job 14:12 tells us. Jesus declares that no man knows the day or the hour of when the heavens are destroyed. Matthew 24, verse 35-36, Mark 16, verse 31-32. The heavens are destroyed. That's when no man knows the day or the hour. If you're going to say, well, no man knows the day or the hour of the rapture, well, that's completely different than the day that the heavens are destroyed. Oh, well, a day is like 1,000 years. And it's like, well, the element of surprise happens when the heavens are destroyed with a great noise. 2 Peter 3:10-18. Jesus comes as a thief in the night when the heavens are destroyed with a great noise. It's like, oh, well, that's the day of the Lord that happens. Well, if the day of the Lord happens as a thief in the night when the heavens are destroyed, then you can't have a rapture event 7 years prior that announces and creates a countdown to when the heavens are destroyed. You see, I'm told often, oh, well, the day of Christ and the day of the Lord, well, they're two separate events, as if we're rightly dividing Christ from the Lord. Christ is the Lord. Hey, you must believe Jesus to be saved. Paul then goes on in 2 Peter 3:10-18 to tell us that people twist Paul's teaching on the matter. Well, number one, this tells us that Peter and Paul, they agreed on what's going on in eschatology, in the return of Christ. Peter says that Jesus comes as a thief in the night when the heavens are destroyed. So the heavens are destroyed. That is also when the resurrection of the dead happens, that we are changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. That is also after the tribulation of those days. It all comes together. Jesus modeled his return in Acts 1:9-14. He returns in like manner as he left. See, he left the Mount of Olives to the sky and then to heaven. He returns in like manner. He comes from heaven to the sky where the resurrection of the dead happens, and then to the Mount of Olives with all of his saints, as Zechariah 14 through 4 through 5 declares. He comes with all of his saints to the Mount of Olives. So if he comes to the Mount of Olives with all of his saints, then he's not in heaven for 7 years. He's not on earth with those who have gotten their physical bodies back so that they can rule and reign, resurrected from the dead. They're going to reign with Christ for 1,000 years. So those who got raptured are not in heaven, separated from the Lord, because we are forevermore with the Lord at that point. So he's not going to separate. Because people actually believe that. Oh, well, those who are raptured go to heaven and then Jesus continues. No. One of the big things that is totally ignored here is the fact that the dead get resurrected. There's a real important reason to totally ignore what Paul calls it, the resurrection of the dead, and change it to rapture, so that this deceitful idea that everybody gets raptured to heaven is presented. Whereas the resurrection of the dead shows that the dead return with him. In 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 13 through 18, verse 14 tells us that the dead return with him and get their physical bodies returned. So they return with him. They're absent from their physical body and present with the Lord, as 2 Corinthians 5:8 tells us. And now they're going to get their physical bodies reunited to them. For the physical body rises first. Paul tells us that these physical bodies that the dead get back, the dead are changed from corruptible to incorruptible, which means that the corruptible means that they rot in the grave, as Acts 2:31 shows. Jesus' body did not see corruption when it went to the grave. Those who are alive and remain are changed from mortal to immortal. That is the opposite of Adam, who was changed from immortal to mortal through sin. So it's not this, they're not getting this glorified body given to them. A glorified body is what people get when they die and go to heaven. It's found in Philippians 2:19 and 20. What people get at the resurrection of the dead is that the dead get changed from corruptible to incorruptible, or from perishable to imperishable, meaning they no longer rot in the grave. And the living get changed from mortal to immortal. And this immortality is defined in Isaiah 65:20, where it says that those who have been there for 100 years, if they die, they will be considered a mere child. So it doesn't mean that they can't die. Well, you can argue and say, hey, look, well, that's a child of somebody who has given a glorified, immortal body is the correct term, because glorified means that they're actually in glory, not on earth. So Paul directly states in verse 50 that these physical bodies do not go to heaven. So to say, hey, look, well, everybody gets raptured to heaven after the resurrection of that, after they get their physical bodies back, return to them, so they can rule and reign for 1,000 years. They go back to heaven for 7 years. No, Paul directly says that these physical bodies do not go to heaven. Verse 50, 1 Corinthians 15. So every single argument for rapture is birthed in deceit. Let's look at the big one that is this big argument that actually makes sense if you have an English version of the Bible, because the English version misrepresents the truth. Often, not all of them, but often it says that it confuses the two words for wrath, because we are not appointed to wrath, Greek or O-R-G-E, orge, but what we are appointed to is eternal salvation and eternally living with him, as seen in 1 Thessalonians 5:9 and 10. And so because we're not appointed to this wrath, often we're told, oh, well, we don't have to go through the tribulation and God's wrath that's being poured on the earth. See, the problem is that God's wrath that is poured on the earth is not orge. It is God's anger, thumos. If you talk to somebody who is Greek speaking, they will tell you, hey, look, there's a big difference between orge and thumos, and that thumos is God's anger. You see, David experienced God's anger when he sinned with Bathsheba, but he never experienced God's wrath, eternal wrath, because he's no longer on earth. He's dead, and he's in heaven. Orge, the wrath we are not appointed to, is defined in Revelation 14:10 as forever burning with fire and brimstone. It tells us that God's eternal wrath is eternal hell. It's not his anger that lasts for a night, temporal, on earth, lasts for a moment, but joy comes in the morning. So to suggest that we are not appointed to wrath and therefore we don't have to go through the tribulation comes from a false ideal that God's eternal wrath is temporal in nature. All right. Hope this is helpful. Remember, you must believe Jesus to be saved. He says that believing is a work. John 6:28 and 29. You must do the work of believing. Well, wait a minute. We are saved by grace. Yes, we are. Grace enables us to do the work. Jesus taught grace. He told it to the rich young ruler, or rather the disciples afterwards, when the rich young ruler went away sorrowful, because the rich young ruler believed Jesus. He received everything that Jesus had to say, but he went away sorrowful because he could not do what Jesus told him to do, and that was total surrender. So often, if you believe the false version that you don't have to surrender all, then you're still Lord of your life in the area that you have not surrendered. The disciples then asked Jesus, it's found in Luke 18. The disciples then asked Jesus, who then can be saved? And Jesus gave the message of grace. For with man it is impossible, but with God all things are possible. The grace of God is given freely to those who humble themselves and boldly go to the throne of grace to obtain it for that time of need. Look, we know that there's those times of need that we're gonna be falling short. So we need to boldly go, humble ourselves today to the throne of grace so that we can obtain that grace for that time of need. All right. Hope this is helpful.